what's going on everyone? Welcome back to another video here on the Nostalgia Factor. So guys, in the past I have talked about many different RPGs. Specifically when it comes to the Mario and Luigi series, I've only really covered Superstar Saga on the Game Boy Advance a few years ago. And since it won in the poll, I figured why not follow up that review with the second game in the series, Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, released back in 2005, developed by Alpha Dream, and published by Nintendo, naturally. Mario and Luigi Partners in Time is that weird middle child between two of the more highly critically acclaimed games within the Mario and Luigi series, between Superstar Saga in 2003 and Bowser's Inside Story in 2009. Now, Partners in Time isn't generally considered to be a bad game, and there are many things that I really do enjoy about this title, especially considering that this is the Mario and Luigi series we're talking here, known for their really good original stories and humor. But this game does have a number of issues that I do want to discuss, mainly concerning the plot and the lack of innovation that it really has when compared to both Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story. But let's just get into the review here and see what I think.
Nintendo!
Knock this out of the way, Mario and Luigi Partners in Time looks incredible on the Nintendo DS. This really shouldn't be a surprise if you're familiar with the Mario and Luigi titles, especially when looking at Bowser's Inside Story, with their impressive animation, the bright color palette, the animations of Mario and Luigi when they're engaged in funny conversations with each other, character reactions, boss fight designs, animations in battle, the overworld and unique locations that you visit no matter which Mario and Luigi game it is. Partners in Time looks great on the Nintendo DS. The fact that Alpha Dream poured this much effort into it and nailed it on their second go-around after a Game Boy Advance game of all things, it really does say a lot for the effort of the development team. So the visuals in the game are absolutely impressive, no complaints there. The soundtrack is kind of where it has a bit more of a drawback for me, compared to what I praised in Superstar Saga for having an amazing soundtrack, whether it be the battle theme or just really any of the other original tracks that popped up in the Bean Bean Kingdom. That soundtrack was amazing in many different ways. Now, in Partners in Time, the soundtrack is not bad at all. There are a lot of good atmospheric tracks, especially for the whole time travel theme, whether you're visiting the past or present versions of certain areas that you have to go into in order to grab, what else? Star fragments. The soundtrack is good, and it really does add a lot of really good ambiance, especially when we're talking about the Shroobs, which are the main villains of this game. And the Shroob theme, the ominous, foreboding music and feeling that you get when you approach these guys or go into the UFO, or even the final confrontation with Queen Shroob, or Princess Shroob, rather. This soundtrack does add a lot to Partners in Time, and it is incredible in many different areas. That being said, however, this is not one of the better soundtracks of the Mario and Luigi series, but as a soundtrack, it is still pretty solid. I would recommend giving a listen to a few samples, unless you listen to these. Reviews, I typically like to dissect the story before we get into the gameplay, but I want to talk about the gameplay of Partners in Time first, because while it is samey in some areas, it does add a few unique mechanics with the baby gameplay, we'll say, with young Mario and young Luigi. The gameplay that you would typically expect is here. Mario and Luigi have a turn-based battle system where they fight against enemies they encounter in the overworld. Each of them take a turn with jumping, using their hammers, using special points that you accumulate throughout battle in order to use Bros moves, which are team attacks that Mario and Luigi can both use. And of course, you have overworld exploration, finding items in item boxes, traveling around, gathering items, progressing through the story. And if you played the Mario and Luigi series, this is a pretty standard battle system, as well as overworld exploration. The difference this time is in two different ways: the initial setup for the gameplay and the baby mechanic. Mario and Luigi, through a series of circumstances throughout the game that involves time travel, encounter their younger selves. And because of that, baby Mario and baby Luigi are able to assist their future selves, or adult counterparts, in solving a variety of overworld puzzles, and helping out in battle with extra moves, that kind of thing. A lot of the puzzles and variety are very creative, and I really do like this part of the gameplay. The battle system may not be anything incredibly new, even with the addition of the babies to score some extra hits with hammers and that kind of thing, but it is still good. Now, the overworld exploration and the puzzle solving with the babies, I think it adds a lot more variety, because there are sections where Mario and Luigi just simply cannot get into certain areas to hit a switch to open a door, or to get to a certain area in order to confront a smaller boss, or something along those lines. It really does add a lot of variety to it, and I really can't do it justice by describing every single situation that you would use young Mario and young Luigi in, but it does work incredibly well for the setup. So I really like the baby mechanics, and especially the added innovation of using both adult and young Mario and Luigi to solve puzzles and as well in the combat system. And the setup for this game is very different from past games as well, because this one actually has a hub world.
Let's go.
So unlike pretty much every other entry in the series, like Superstar Saga or Inside Story, this game doesn't really have an overarching world map where you visit various areas following the story or not, because every area that you go back to, because of the time travel theme itself, each area is accessible through a portal in Princess Peach's castle. So when you go to a past version of an area, you have to go through Peach's castle, go back to the area, and then that's how you enter and exit it. So it's a very different setup from before. It doesn't really add too much to the game, I find. It's a fine way to progress through levels and see the story play out, but I personally like the more open world design of the other Mario and Luigi titles, where you have that sense of exploration and freedom, whereas you're more restricted going to these portals because you can't freely explore each of these areas. So, especially with the whole hub world setup. So, while it is creative for the story, the hub world is fine, but not as good as the open world design for other Mario and Luigi games. Now, the story in Partners in Time is really where I have the most issues with the game, and I'm not the only one. A lot of people in the community typically have mixed reactions when it comes to the plot of the game, and without going into deep spoiler territory, because this is an in-depth RPG story regardless, and I don't want to ruin the experience for those of you who are curious to try out the Mario and Luigi games. But essentially, Professor Egad invents a time machine that Princess Peach herself goes to test out, and through a variety of circumstances, the machine goes wrong, transports younger versions of Mario and Luigi into the present day, and unleashes an alien invasion known as the Shroobs. The Shroobs come to present-day Mushroom Kingdom in order to abduct Peach and, of course, take over. They're aliens that look like mushrooms. And in order for them to combat the Shroob threat, they have to travel through various different past time periods, being Mario and Luigi, and stop the Shroobs in the past, so that way they stop the invasion in the present, or in this case, the future. So it's a time-traveling adventure to stop a race of aliens from taking over the Mushroom Kingdom both in the future and the past. And Mario and Luigi team up with their younger counterparts in order to do so. Now, on paper, that sounds incredibly simple, and to be honest, I think it's a fine enough story. There's some entertaining moments, some creative boss fights. There's definitely a good dynamic still with Mario and Luigi. Not really a lot of interesting side characters this time, like Inside Story or something along those lines, but Kylie Koopa and a few of the other people that show up kind of work out, I guess. The story, like I mentioned before, with the hub world issue is broken up into different sections, because you're going to retrieve pieces of a legendary star that can help stop the Shroob Princess, and ultimately use it to stop the Shroobs, so it's based around this kind of mechanic, so to speak, and the plot is fine overall. I mean, I really don't have a ton to say about this one, because it's just not as creative or innovative as the other titles in the Mario and Luigi series. The Shroobs really aren't that interesting and show up just to be another villain in the Mario and Luigi franchise. The Shroob Princess really doesn't play much of a role. She doesn't really appear that much in the game. Bowser, for instance, although his younger counterpart shows up to cause some trouble here and there, really doesn't pose much of a threat, and adult Bowser barely shows up anyway. And the journey to actually go and collect these star fragments, despite the creative and bizarre moments that do show up throughout the story that Mario and Luigi have to face, given the time travel aesthetic, the story just doesn't hit as hard compared to the events that take place in Inside Story or Superstar Saga. I mean, it's a fine enough story. I do think it works for an original Mario and Luigi RPG, but the darker tone they try and go for doesn't really work out. The villains are generally bland and boring, and with the hub world structure of going through these different areas throughout time, the dynamic just really isn't there for the events to have that same punch. Not a bad story by any means, but this story definitely isn't as good as the other titles in the series. But I will say, there are some pretty damn cool cameos. Covers it for Partners in Time, guys. I mean, when it comes to talking about this game and comparing it to past reviews that I've done, like horrible licensed games that I've covered recently, like Cars, for instance, there isn't really much to talk about with Partners in Time. It is a good game. I do want to stress that all in all. It has some beautiful visuals, a good soundtrack, creative dynamic with Mario and Luigi and their past selves with a decent story, and the gameplay system is pretty much the same from the other Mario and Luigi titles. Partners in Time does have issues, along with the hub world system not being the best and some story issues, but it is still a good game all in all to experience and play. The biggest issue with Partners in Time is that it just doesn't innovate that much compared to the other games. It's a fine middle ground game between Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story that had more creative gameplay mechanics, areas, and definitely a better story and villains. Partners in Time is not a bad game by any means. This is definitely one I can recommend you guys go and check out, but it's just kind of there at the end of the day. It's good overall for the product that you're going to receive, but at the same time, it's not the first recommendation I would have if you're looking to jump into the series for the first time. So Partners in Time is definitely worth checking out, but it's good and not much else. And that wraps up Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. Honestly, guys, like I said, compared to some other reviews that I've done, not really a ton to say about this one, but it was one I was curious to kind of talk about with you guys, to kind of get your thoughts and input on, because this is definitely a more divisive one in the community. Some people love this game, and a lot of people really don't care for it as much, especially compared to some of the other Mario RPGs that are out there. So, let me know what you guys think about Partners in Time in the comment section down below. If you've played it, if you enjoy it, if you do think it is one of the worst games in the Mario and Luigi series, or maybe you think it's better than Inside Story or Superstar Saga. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Give the video a like if you did enjoy, and subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up with future reviews, unboxings, gameplay videos, and of course collaborations and everything else we do here on the channel. And that's all from me. Until next time, this has been Ryan from the Nostalgia Factor saying, keep on gaming.